I never thought I'd be telling this story, but here I am at 45, looking back at how my life took such unexpected turns. My wife and I had been married for 15 years, and for the first 5 years, everything seemed perfect. We had 2 wonderful kids. Our older one was just learning to walk, and the younger one was still drinking from a bottle when things started falling apart. After our second child was born, my wife became distant. She said she needed time to recover to find herself again. Being a supportive husband, I gave her all the space she needed. But something felt off. She wouldn't talk to me like before, wouldn't share her thoughts, and kept saying she was just tired whenever I tried to have a real conversation. I suggested counseling, thinking maybe we could work through whatever was bothering her. She brushed it off, saying it was just temporary, that she'd bounce back. But months went by and nothing changed. If anything, the distance between us grew wider. Then came the day that changed everything. I discovered she wasn't being honest about where she was going. One afternoon, when she said she was meeting friends for coffee, I found out she was meeting someone else. Not just someone, several people. She had been dating other men behind my back. The confrontation that followed was intense. There was no violence, but there were tears, shouts, and painful admissions. She said she'd fallen out of love with me and wanted an open marriage. She claimed having 2 babies so close together had taken a toll on her, and this was her way of feeling alive again. I was devastated. My first instinct was to get a divorce, but reality hit hard when I talked to a lawyer. With 2 small kids and my modest income at the time, divorce would have been a financial nightmare. In our state, I'd have to pay alimony and child support, and there was no guarantee I'd get to see my kids regularly. So we came to an unusual arrangement. We decided to live separately, but in the same house, a 2-story duplex we'd bought from an elderly couple. I moved upstairs to what used to be a guest suite, while she kept the main floor. We became co-parents, living separate lives under one roof. She could date whoever she wanted, and technically, so could I. For 8 years, I watched as she lived her life freely, bringing different partners home. I focused on myself instead, joined sports clubs, took up hiking, and occasionally dated but never got serious with anyone. It wasn't easy watching her move on while I was stuck in limbo, but I did it for my kids. Then, 3 months ago, something unexpected happened. I met someone at work. Let's call her Sarah. She's younger than me, works in a different department, and at first, we were just friendly colleagues. We'd grab lunch together, chat about work, and gradually started spending more time together. It wasn't romantic at first, just 2 people who enjoyed each other's company. But last month, things changed. We kissed, and suddenly everything felt different. For the first time in years, I felt that spark again. Sarah started spending more time at my place, and that's when my wife started acting strange. My wife's behavior became increasingly odd. She'd suddenly appear whenever Sarah was around, trying to act like we were still a normal married couple. One evening, Sarah and I were having a quiet dinner in my kitchen space when my wife walked in uninvited. She just sat down with her plate and started making awkward small talk, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Sarah and I just looked at each other, not knowing how to react. But it didn't stop there. Another time, Sarah and I were watching a movie upstairs when my wife burst in, demanding I help our younger son with his science project. This made no sense because we had a clear arrangement. I helped our older kid with schoolwork, and she handled the younger one's studies. When I reminded her of this, she got angry and started yelling, "Isn't he your son too?" It turned into a huge argument, and Sarah left feeling uncomfortable. After that incident, Sarah told me she didn't want to come to my place anymore. We still met, but only at her apartment. I couldn't blame her. Who would want to deal with this kind of drama? But it wasn't fair. For 8 years, I had respected my wife's choices, never interfered with her relationships, and now when I finally found someone special, she was trying to ruin it. I confronted her about her behavior. She denied everything, saying I was imagining things. When I threatened to get a divorce if she didn't stop interfering, she started crying, claiming she was just worried about our son's project because she was busy with work. She even called Sarah to apologize, but the damage was done. Sarah maintained her distance, saying she preferred meeting at her place. I felt stuck. I wanted to be with Sarah, but I was worried my wife would keep causing problems. The thought of divorce, which I'd avoided for so long, started seeming like the only solution. But I still had the same concerns. How would it affect our kids? They were older now. sure, but they'd still have to deal with their parents splitting up officially. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got, both at my wife for forcing an open marriage on me years ago, and at myself for accepting it instead of standing up for what I wanted. I kept wondering if I should wait a few more years until the kids were grown up, but then I might lose Sarah. She hadn't said anything about waiting, and I couldn't expect her to put her life on hold for me. After lots of thinking, I decided to see a therapist. I needed to sort out my feelings and figure out what to do. The sessions helped me realize something important. My kids were entering their teenage years, and in a few years, they'd be starting their own lives. Did it make sense to keep sacrificing my happiness? I had an honest talk with Sarah. I told her how I felt about her and that I wanted to make things work. I explained that if she felt the same way, I would do whatever it took to make our relationship work. Sarah admitted she had strong feelings for me too, but was worried about my complicated family situation. She said she didn't mind me having kids, she just couldn't handle my wife's presence in our lives. That's when I made my decision. I told her I would move out, and my kids could choose where they wanted to stay. They were old enough to make that choice. Sarah supported my decision, and my therapist suggested family counseling to help the kids understand the situation better. When I told my wife about the counseling, she lost it. She called me selfish and said I was ruining our kids' lives for my own desires. That was the last straw. I reminded her of her own actions, how she brought different men home when our kids were still babies. Despite her protests, I took the kids to counseling. The sessions were actually helpful. Our kids understood more than we'd given them credit for. They appreciated that we'd stayed together for their sake, but also said they wanted me to be happy. It gave me the courage to tell my wife I was filing for divorce. She acted shocked, crying about how she thought we'd never get divorced, that she'd turned down marriage proposals from other men to stay with our family. I didn't buy it. I told her to stop the guilt trips. I keep paying for the kids' education through college. She could keep the house and car as alimony, and I'd move out. I could afford it now, unlike years ago. She tried everything to change my mind. She even suggested I could live with Sarah while staying married to her. But I refused. I loved Sarah and didn't want her to be seen as just someone I was dating while married to another woman. I knew my wife would use that against us somehow. Just when things seemed to be settling, my wife pulled another trick. While I was on vacation with the kids, she went to Sarah and tried to convince her to end our relationship. She told Sarah she was breaking up our family and hurting our kids. When that didn't work, she tried telling Sarah that I wasn't serious about her, that she was just a fling. But Sarah handled it perfectly. She didn't get upset or try to contact me during the vacation. She waited until I got back and told me everything. That's what I admire about her. She's secure and patient, even with all this chaos around us. When I found out what my wife had done, I confronted her one last time. I finally told her exactly what I thought about her behavior over the years. Shortly after, I moved out. The kids decided to stay with me, but since my new place didn't have enough rooms, they stayed with their mom temporarily while I looked for a bigger house. My wife tried everything to stop the divorce, from crying to yelling, from guilt-tripping to begging for another chance. She even tore up the first set of divorce papers. My lawyer had to threaten legal action before she finally agreed to sign. Now, a month later, the divorce is final. I found a bigger place, and the kids have moved in with me, though they visit their mom every couple of weeks. Setting up the new house with them has been great. We let them choose everything for their rooms. The last time I saw my wife was when the kids were moving out. She surprised me by being calm. She apologized to the kids, told them they could visit any time, and then asked me to have coffee with her. During that conversation, she finally admitted she'd taken me for granted, thought Sarah would be temporary like her other relationships, and realized too late how badly she'd treated me. We hugged for the first time in 8 years before I left. I can't really describe how I felt about that moment. Not happy, not sad, just different. The last 6 months have changed my life completely. Sometimes it still feels unreal, but I know I made the right choice. It'll take time to process everything, but for the first time in years, I'm looking forward to the future instead of just getting through each day. Looking back now, I realize sometimes you have to go through the hard times to find your way to better ones. It wasn't the path I expected my life to take, but I'm finally at peace with where it led me.